Hi, it's Katrina. Polar bear versus walrus. With the heaviest polar bear coming in at only half the size of a walrus, you might think the tusked and flippered walrus would come out on top. The truth is, polar bears are the ones who prey on walruses. But how do they do it? When walruses come ashore to rest, polar bears often plot an attack, chasing them back into the sea. Doing this repeatedly is a way to separate the weaker and older walruses from the bunch. Sometimes, younger walruses are trampled by older ones in their mad dash to make it back into the safety of the water. That makes the polar bear's job easier because they only have a 10% kill rate and depend on the element of surprise. But walruses do have another defense mechanism other than their size, those saber-like tusks. They use them to deliver harsh blows, often causing injuries that prove to be fatal to polar bears. Mongoose versus snake. While the mongoose might look cute and cuddly, sometimes, it takes a lot of grit to take on a venomous snake. This long-bodied, bushy-tailed animal is a carnivore, and one of their greatest rivals is the cobra, as you know if you've heard the story of Rikki Tikki Tavi. Mainly found in southern Asia, Africa, and Europe, there are over 30 different species of mongoose. With a healthy appetite for meat, the mongoose feeds on birds, rodents, insects, you name it, but they have also been known to kill and eat venomous snakes. They ain't scared. You might think that when a mongoose and snake come face to face that the snake would win. With its quick movements and dangerous venom, snakes are no doubt a threat. But the mongoose is not only agile but fearless. Able to survive snake bites, they have a special type of receptor in their bodies that stops snake venom from binding to their blood. Their tough coat and superb hunting skills help them to overcome the fiercest of snake competitors. Shark versus dolphin. There are many stories of dolphins saving humans from sharks. These two do not get along. Dolphins versus sharks seems to come down to brain versus brawn. Very few shark attacks on dolphins have been observed, but researchers from the Dolphin Communication Project in the Bahamas have been studying the shark bite scars on dolphins. Tiger sharks and bull sharks seem to be the main culprits, with the youngest dolphins having the most marks. So sharks appear to target the calves. Sharks may be tough, but dolphins are clever and know how to exploit the soft spot of their cold-blooded rivals. Dolphins will use their tough snout to attack sharks from below, ramming their soft underbelly. With this strategy, they are able to not only stun the shark, but sometimes these blows have been known to render them unconscious. If two or more dolphins attack a shark like this, it could be fatal. Dolphins also have the protection of their pod. When a dolphin is at the risk of being attacked by a shark, the pod springs into action and surrounds the threatened member, slapping their tails to confuse and scare off the shark. Sharks are probably better off going after something easier. Crocodile versus hippo. One of the most ferocious rivalries in nature is the one between the crocodile and the hippopotamus. Both are dangerous and powerful animals that are highly territorial. Let's look at hippos first. Hippos are considered the most dangerous animal in Africa, more than sharks and snakes, since people often come into contact with them in the rivers as they are fishing and washing clothes. A fisherman in Senegal describes them as evil monsters that attack villagers night and day. Many have died and many more are injured as fishermen go out onto the water to retrieve their fishing nets. According to National Geographic, a male hippo's mass coming at you is about the same as 2 football teams combined. Hippos can weigh anywhere between 3,500 pounds and 6,000 pounds or more. They are very fast in the water, and reports of marauding hippos happen every year, trampling and goring people who get too close, dragging them into lakes and tipping over their boats, eliminating them with just one bite. And remember, the hippo is an herbivore. Because hippos and crocodiles share the same habitat, they not only cross paths, but they get involved in confrontations that can leave one or the other injured. The Nile crocodile also has a reputation of a fierce man-eater. Africa's largest crocodilian can weigh a max size of about 20 feet and weigh almost 2,000 pounds, still nowhere near the size of an adult hippo. The difference is that the crocodile is a carnivore, an ambush predator that sits and waits for its meal. Crocodiles usually attack to kill and will eat pretty much everything. It's believed that crocodiles kill between 200 to 700 people a year in Africa alone, although many attacks go unreported. So between these two giant animals, when it comes to territory and competition, how do they get along? It is a nervous truce that helps them coexist. While a crocodile would happily go after a baby hippo, it has the whole herd to deal with, and the adult crocodile is no match for the average-sized adult hippo. But sometimes animals get cranky living in close quarters, and crocs get hungry, and hippos get mad. In 2009, a crocodile in Tanzania got too close to hippos bathing in the river. It suddenly panicked and ended up running across the backs of the hippos. Bad decision. It got stuck in a labyrinth of hippos that started to encircle the croc and take turns biting it. It had no chance of escape. In 2017, a visitor to a national park in South Africa witnessed an incredible display of hippos saving a wildebeest from a croc attack. When the crocodile grabbed the leg of the wildebeest, a pair of nearby hippos jumped to the animal's rescue and charged the croc until it let go. Still, it's a bit of a toss-up when it comes time to predict who would win out in a battle one-on-one. Crocodiles have a firm, powerful bite that could cause some serious damage and are apex predators. There is a reason they are still at the top of the food chain, but they most likely would want to go after something a little less challenging. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Hornets versus bees. The Japanese giant hornet is pretty scary. It is a very large insect with adults reaching to almost 2 inches long and a wingspan of about 2.5 inches. This hornet has a painful sting and can sting repeatedly, with its venom affecting our nervous system and tissue. These big guys go out to find honeybees, which they will then kill and dismember like a Viking raid and bring back their plunder of bee thoraxes and honey to feed their larvae. Wired magazine calls it a winged T-Rex, an apex predator capable of taking down any insect and incapacitating any giant mammal that gets in its way. Like us, for example. The hornets will send scouts to look for hives, and the scout will leave pheromones to send a message to its buddies. 30 hornets can destroy an entire colony of 30,000 honeybees in less than 4 hours. So how are the honeybees supposed to fight back? They have come up with an ingenious way to fight back: a group hug. Their stingers are not long enough to penetrate the thick outer skin of a hornet, so honeybees have had to get creative. When a scout comes around and leaves the pheromones, the bees will all stay in the hive until the hornet comes in. Then, they swarm their attacker and form a ball around them, using the vibration of their flight muscles to create heat. A mass of bees can heat an area up to 116 degrees Fahrenheit, which is enough to kill a hornet. They suffocate it like a boa constrictor, preventing the hornet from being able to pump blood around its body. These bee balls need only 30 to 60 minutes to kill the hornet, but they still have to be careful. With only a few degrees separating the temperature needed to kill the other bees around them, the honeybees have adapted specialized brain activity to monitor how hot things are getting. Their ability to know how to carefully increase their temperatures to a specific level is the difference between a cooked hornet and killing their fellow honeybees. While the hornet might take out some fellow honeybees in the process, the hive is saved. While Japanese honeybees have learned this, European honeybees have not, so they are extremely vulnerable to this giant beast. Lion versus hyena. Lions and hyenas have been fighting for thousands of years. A lion can take on a hyena for sure, but not a clan of 25 or more of them. In 2015 and 2016, there was a harsh drought that allowed hyenas to become even more dominant in the African bush. Because both species live in the same areas and depend on the same prey for food, it's no surprise that these territorial animals can get aggressive. Everybody is hungry. Hyenas are much smaller and more ragged-looking than lions, and they have a reputation for being scavengers who like to steal the kills of other animals. And even though lions are 3 to 4 times larger, hyenas often use their cunning methods of teamwork and harassment to intimidate lions and eat the fruits of the lion's labor. Hyenas have powerful jaws, estimated to be equal to 1 ton of force. But lions, with their power and ability to make aerodynamic moves when in battle, usually win by pouncing on their hyena foes and biting their neck, which usually results in the hyenas suffocating to death. This rivalry runs deep, and there is no love lost between these two species. Meerkats versus birds of prey. Found in the deserts of Africa, meerkats are a carnivorous member of the Mongoose family. A small mammal that is known to live and work in groups, meerkats use an extensive and intricate burrow system to move around, which is probably a good thing. It helps keep them safe from predators, including various birds of prey like hawks and eagles who like to snatch them off the ground. Because they are so small, meerkats use their large community known as a gang or a clan to practice safety in numbers. At least one individual is usually on guard to protect the others from attacks. They also dig dead-end tunnels called bolt holes that they can dash into quickly when a bird of prey threatens them. By staying in constant communication using different tones and noises, they can keep everyone in the family informed of where they are, and also alert others with different alarm sounds when predators are in the sky or on the ground. With 20 different calls, meerkats have adapted a complex signaling system that helps them to keep the entire clan safe when threatened. See? Communication is key. Cougar versus wolves and bears. Cougars are native to North and South America. The second largest cat in North America, the cougar is also known as a puma, mountain lion, or panther. Skilled hunters, they will attack all sorts of animals, hiding the carcass after the kill and eating it over the course of a few days. While cougars don't necessarily have any natural predators, that doesn't mean that they don't have problems. In North America, grizzly bears along with wolves compete with cougars for resources, leading to some intense conflicts when they do come face to face. Sharing your territory with other top predators is never easy. In a new study, researchers have found that wolves, grizzly bears, black bears, and jaguars often dominate pumas. However, they do tend to beat out coyotes and maned wolves. Since cougars are solitary animals, having to face an entire pack of wolves does not usually go well. In a study done in Canada's Banff National Park, researchers found that wolves stole prey carcasses from cougars. Interestingly, cougars didn't do the same to the wolves. Even though the cougar is more powerful one-to-one, they do fall victim when they are alone and are overtaken by an entire wolf pack. When competition for food becomes intense, grizzly bears have been known to use their heavy weight to scare cougars away from their kills, and mother bears especially will not hesitate to take a swipe at any threat to her cubs. Cougars or pumas often lose the food that they hunted and have to spend more time and energy hunting more prey. Zebras versus big cats. African zebras are known for their ability to run between 30 and 40 miles per hour, which comes in handy when being chased by one of their many rivals in the animal kingdom. Everyone from lions to leopards to cheetahs all have it out for them, and big cats are powerful predators with the ability to maul their prey and crush necks with a suffocating bite. Little do they know, though, that the zebra has a secret weapon, the ability to kick their predators with so much force that they can do some serious damage of their own. But that doesn't mean that they are out of the woods. During the seasonal migration between the Serengeti Plains and the local National Reserve, migrating zebras unfortunately end up as dinner for Nile crocodiles and many big cats that are just waiting for the weaker ones to fall behind, stumble, break a leg, anything to separate one from the herd. But zebras can also use their unique coloring to their advantage. You might think their black and white stripes would make them easier to find, but because their main predator, the lion, is colorblind, the zebra's stripes blend into the wavy lines of the tall grass. They are even more of a benefit when zebras gather together to protect one another. Instead of being able to pick out each individual zebra, the lion instead sees one big mass moving in unison, confusing them. Lions hunting in pairs and in groups have a success rate of about 30%. Bringing down prey from a herd is difficult, but once one is separated from the group, it's usually only a matter of time before sharp claws and sharp teeth are able to take down a solitary zebra. Humpback whales versus orcas. Scientist Robert Pittman was on a research expedition in 2009 sponsored by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration when he spotted a very strange sight. After seeing a lone seal on an ice floe being circled by killer whales, he noticed that somebody else was there. A pair of humpbacks were swimming between the seal and the orcas, vocalizing and churning the water up in an attempt to shield the seal and eventually chase the orcas away. After further research and analyzing over 100 interactions between humpbacks and killer whales over a span of 60 years, the biologists found that humpbacks, the only whales known to attack orcas, often band together and travel great distances to interrupt and stop killer whale attacks on other animals. Even more astonishing is the fact that these protective displays usually lasted for at least 1 hour and could go on as long as 7 hours. So how do humpbacks know when an orca is attacking another animal, especially when they are miles away? Even though they are stealthy hunters, orcas make a lot of noises and vocalizations when they attack. Somehow, humpbacks are able to recognize these sounds as similar sounds they've heard when orcas attack their own young. They will go to help escort other whales protecting calves, even when they are not their own. Orcas often go after humpback whale calves, and more orca tooth marks are found on humpbacks than any other whale species. While calves do often fall victim to orcas, adult humpback whales can take on an entire pod of orcas. Roman coin hoard. Last year, a Polish man named Marius Dill discovered some scattered coins while looking for antlers in a 328-foot section of an abandoned field in Sieciobors, a village in the Lublin region of southeastern Poland. That's a fun find! He notified archaeologists at the museum, who unearthed 1,753 coins total and took them to the museum to analyze them. They turned out to be Roman in origin and were manufactured over a 100-year period between the end of the 1st and the end of the 2nd centuries. Their age was determined based on the images the coins bear, with the oldest pieces featuring the Emperor Nerva and the newest ones bearing the image of Septimius Severus. Altogether, the hoard equals roughly 6 years' pay for a Roman legionary, according to museum director Bartolomew Bartecki, who believes they were originally placed in a wooden box or a leather pouch decorated with silver-plated bronze rivets, although the container did not survive the test of time. It wasn't enough to buy a small village, but it was not a small amount, especially for barbarian tribes, he explained. During the 2nd century, the Vandals inhabited what is now Lublin, but they were soon driven out by the Goths, who began traveling from Scandinavia to southeastern Europe during the early 3rd century. Perhaps the Vandals hoped that they would return to their lands in the near future, so they decided to bury the coins. But they were wrong. The museum plans to put the coins on public display. Paintings on Mummy's Coffin. Conservators at the Perth Museum and Art Gallery in Scotland recently made an unexpected discovery while examining the mummified remains of an ancient Egyptian woman named Ta-Ker-Hub. Probably not how she would have pronounced it, but I'm sure she'll forgive me. The 3,000-year-old mummy had laid undisturbed inside her coffin. When she was removed from her resting place, researchers were careful to leave her inside her coffin. Over 100 years later, researchers took her out to preserve her and noticed that she had been laying on top of incredible painted figures. The two paintings line the internal and external bases of the bottom part of the coffin. The more intact of the two images is called She of the West, and represents the Egyptian goddess Amentet, or Imentet, who is depicted wearing a red dress and with ribbons draped around her arms, and her head facing to the right. Researchers believe the painting is based on a statue because the goddess is shown on a platform and supporting pole. Mark Hall, the collections officer at Perth Museum and Art Gallery, explained to Alan Young from The Scotsman that staff had never had a reason to lift the mummy out of her casket before, and so were completely surprised to find these bonus paintings. Score! Ta-Ker-Hub was possibly a priestess or princess from Thebes, according to a 2013 study carried out by researchers at the University of Manchester. She died sometime between 747 and 656 BC, during Egypt's 25th dynasty. The priestess was discovered in the late 1800s, and her tomb had already been looted by grave robbers, but she has been safely kept at the Perth Museum since 1936. Oldest human DNA. The fossilized tooth of a mysterious human ancestor has finally been identified over 25 years after its discovery. In 1994, archaeologists unearthed the fossilized remains of members of this archaic group while digging in northern Spain's Atapuerca Mountains. The largest bone fragments, which appeared to have been cannibalized, belong to 6 individuals and date back some 800,000 years. They share some characteristics with modern humans and several of our ancestors, but were distinct enough to warrant their own classification. Researchers labeled the unknown group Homo antecessor and theorized that they may represent the common ancestor of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans. They learned differently when they analyzed H. antecessor's tooth enamel proteins, a process that enabled them to study the genetic material. Although these proteins contain less information than DNA, meaning they vary less between species, studying them, a method called paleoproteomics, is a groundbreaking way to learn more about humans and animals whose remains are so old their DNA has irretrievably broken down. The team believes that H. antecessor was likely a sister species of the ancestor we share with Neanderthals and Denisovans. These results are far from conclusive, but they may bring us one step closer to sorting out our very confusing human family tree. 5,000-year-old sword. Archaeologist Vittoria dell'Armelina was still a PhD student when she discovered a 5,000-year-old misidentified sword during a 2017 leisure trip to the St. Lazarus Monastery in the Venetian Lagoon. The monastery has been home to the Mekhitartist congregation of Armenian Catholic monks since 1717. A 43-centimeter metal sword caught Victoria's eye near the end of her guided tour. It was labeled as a medieval object, but based on her specialized knowledge of Bronze Age weaponry, she knew it was likely much older. For the next 2 years, further research was carried out on the sword, including chemical composition analyses, which revealed that the weapon is made of an alloy of arsenic and copper, or arsenical bronze. This material was common between the 4th and 3rd millenniums BC, long time ago, and resembles other weapons from an archaeological site in eastern Anatolia called the Royal Palace of Arslantepe in both chemical makeup and shape. An Armenian art collector sent the sword with a collection of other gifts to a monk in 1886. A note that came with the sword claimed that it was discovered at Kavak, a settlement along the Black Sea in what is now eastern Turkey, but it got mixed into a collection of medieval artifacts following Alishan's death. It's one of the oldest known swords ever discovered, and perhaps the oldest known example of its type. Lead-spiked beer. While excavating a series of Georgian and Victorian-era cellars in Leeds, England, archaeologists unearthed a stash of 600 bottles of beer. Located under the building stairs at the former Scarborough Castle Inn, it looked like ginger beer. Most of the bottles bore labels saying J.E. Richardson of Leeds, while the others came from a variety of 1880s breweries. The team tested the liquid in some of the bottles instead of just popping them open and having a few, which was definitely a good thing since they contained a mix of alcohol and toxic lead. At about 3% alcohol by volume, the drinks were the same strength as a mild English session ale, Elliot Routh reported for VinePair. The liquid also contained 0.13 milligrams per liter of lead, far above the Environmental Protection Agency's recommended safe maximum of 0.015 milligrams per liter. This unusually high lead concentration could have irreversibly damaged drinkers' internal organs and likely would have made them feel weak and sick, according to Smithsonian Magazine. Researchers are unsure how the toxic metal made its way into the beer, but they suspect it came from lead pipes feeding into the breweries that were used to make it. Discoveries like this remind us that while some archaeological discoveries turn our understanding of the past completely on its head, others offer us an equally fascinating glimpse into the day-to-day lives of past generations. And finding alcohol for an archaeologist is always fun. Medieval shrine. While making repairs on a railway embankment following a landslide near the town of Guildford in southern England, a team of workers discovered a cave containing a medieval shrine or hermitage of some sort. The shallow sandstone cave contains artwork that experts believe dates back to the 14th century. Archaeologists who analyzed the engravings and carvings have possibly connected the structure to the ruins of the medieval Church of St. Catherine. These are located on a nearby hill, but they also think it may have been used for cult activity predating the church's existence. The cave contained what appear to be shrines or decorative niches, together with carved initials and other markings, said a spokesperson for Archaeology Southeast. These niches, or sections, range in height from 1 to 2.3 feet. There are black marks on the cave ceiling thought to be soot from lamps. Further analyses, including radiocarbon dating, are being carried out on the markings and other features of the cave, including 2 suspected fire pits, to hopefully help determine how far back the cave dates, who used it, and why. Archaeologists note that the cave may have been larger before the railway was constructed into the hill during the 1840s. Lost Maya Capital. An odd encounter in 2014 has led to the recent discovery of a long-lost Maya capital in Chiapas in southeastern Mexico. That year, a roadside food vendor flagged down archaeology student Whitaker Schroeder and explained that his friend, a cattle rancher, had found an ancient tablet on his property. They knew that the archaeologists had been doing research in the town. Whitaker and another graduate student went to the rancher's house and verified the tablet's authenticity. Suspecting there may be more things to find, an international team from Canada, Mexico, and the US came together in 2018 and began excavations at the property. The site, named La Caja Celtal, proved to be the capital of an ancient Maya kingdom called Sac-Tzi. It was settled in 750 BC and occupied for 1,000 years after. It's smaller than other important Maya cities like Chichen Itza and Palenque, but is impressive in its own right, and once boasted numerous buildings that once housed the local elite, religious sites, a ball court, ceremonial center, dozens of sculptures, and a 45-foot pyramid. One of the monuments the team found is covered with inscriptions about rituals, battles, a rain god, and a mythical water serpent. The team plans to return to the site and continue their excavations, as well as LiDAR surveys, which will help give them an idea of what may be hidden beneath the area's thick vegetation. Speaking of recent discoveries in Mexico, there has been a lot of debate recently about artifacts discovered here in 2019 too, specifically statues and sculptures of figures that remind many people of aliens. Are these artifacts real, or is someone making them and trying to pass them off as authentic? Reportedly, these artifacts date back to the time of the Maya and were found in caves between Veracruz and Puebla. They represent humanoid figures, but with large heads and eyes and 3 fingers on their hands. Academics are very skeptical about these finds, and information is very scarce. If you have any more insight, let me know in the comments below. Neanderthal string. Us humans have long thought of our Neanderthal cousins as not very bright, more primitive versions of ourselves. One of the many characteristics we've cited as a distinction between us and them is early humans' ability to make and use tools, something we didn't think until recently that Neanderthals were capable of. But we were wrong, and as we discover more and more evidence of Neanderthals being more advanced than we thought, it's becoming clearer that they deserve much more credit than we've given them. In fact, researchers are starting to believe that our extinct relatives weren't much different from us. Archaeologists recently discovered the world's oldest known cord fragments at Abri-du-Maras, an excavation site in southeastern France, where Neanderthals lived between 90,000 and 42,000 years ago. This string dates back roughly 50,000 years, making it much older than the world's previous oldest known cord fragments, which are 19,000 years old from Israel. The artifact, a micro-residue of fibers, was found among remnants of many other Neanderthal tools. The idea that Neanderthals were cognitively inferior to modern humans is becoming increasingly untenable, the researchers wrote in their study, which appeared in the journal Scientific Reports. The string was likely made from the fibers of the inner layer of some type of conifer bark. To you, it might just be string, but thousands of years ago, string was huge. Think of all the things that you can make and sew, tools for hunting, fishing, making bags to carry things, fabric to wear, all kinds of stuff. Besides indicating that Neanderthals used tools, the cord fragment points to them having a mathematical understanding of numbers and a similar cognitive complexity to humans. Early domesticated crops. Until recently, experts knew of 4 places in the world where the world's first domesticated crops emerged: China, the Middle East, Mesoamerica, and the Andes. Now, an international team of researchers has added a 5th domestication area in southwestern Amazonia to that list. Over 10,000 years ago, during the early Holocene, manioc, squash, and other edibles became domesticated in Llanos de Moxos, a 48,700 square mile savanna in the Beni department of Bolivia. Raised fields, mounds, canals, forest islands, and certain other earthen features are telltale signs that humans influenced the landscape. Using remote sensing, the team mapped large areas of forest islands and discovered that some are of man-made origin while others are not. Within these islands, they found evidence of yucca, cassava, squash, and maize dating back between 10,000 and 6,500 years ago. While scientists have long theorized that early crop domestication likely occurred in southwestern Amazonia, this is the first documented evidence of it. These findings suggest that the early Holocene inhabitants in the region had a more varied society than we thought. London's true age. Archaeologists recently announced a discovery that may put the age of London at 3,000 years, or 3 times older than previously thought. Just 50 feet outside the historic city's northern border, they unearthed evidence of a prehistoric ceremonial site. There were 436 fragments of Neolithic pottery. Scientific analysis at the University of Bristol revealed that certain pots were used for processing milk, most likely for dairy products like cheese or butter, while others were used for making a meat stew. Yum! Further investigation indicated that the 436 fragments were part of a garbage dump that contained thousands of shards at one time. Ritual feasting and pottery depositing often occurred at sites like this, which have been discovered elsewhere in Britain. The finding, which is unlike anything ever found in the immediate area, suggests that London did not start out as a town or a village, but perhaps as a place where people gathered for social and religious reasons like rituals and feasts. Before now, London's beginning was marked by its establishment as a town during the 1st century, a time of Roman conquest. Based on the new discovery, however, that date could possibly be pushed back a few thousand years. It's unclear what, if any, human activity occurred in the centuries between then and the 1st century, but researchers are uncovering more and more signs that there was. Malagasy leaf-nosed snake. Madagascar is home to countless endemic species, including at least 94 snakes. Perhaps the most unique among them is the Langaha madagascariensis, the Malagasy leaf-nosed snake. French zoologist Pierre-Joseph Bonneterre first described it in 1790, and ever since it's remained in its own genus, since it's so bizarre. Leaf-nosed snakes are best known for their strange nasal appendages, hence their name. They display a high degree of sexual dimorphism, with females having a serrated, more leaf-shaped appendage, while those of males are longer and pointier. They are born with these noses, so they probably have a special purpose. Scientists are unsure what the snakes use these strange appendages for. One possibility is that they help snakes mimic the long, pointed seed pods of Malagasy plants. Another theory is that the nasal appendages allow water to comfortably drip from the snakes' heads, given their preference for hanging headfirst from tree branches. While these snakes are usually calm and reluctant to bite, they are venomous. Bite symptoms include extreme pain and swelling at the bite site, nausea, and difficulty breathing that can last for several days. Very little else is known about these elusive snakes. Spider-tailed viper. Biologist Stephen Anderson first noticed the spider-tailed viper in 1970 while examining a specimen at the Field Museum in Chicago. It was labeled as a Middle Eastern snake species called the Persian horned viper, but this one had what he described as an oval knob-like structure with leg-like scales protruding from it. It looked like an arachnid. Was the snake the unfortunate victim of an injury, a health condition, or a genetic mutation? Anderson spent over 40 years wondering about this until finally an Iranian amateur naturalist named Hamid Bostanchi stumbled upon another such snake. Finally, in 2006, Anderson and his colleagues had enough evidence to suggest that the oddly tailed creature was indeed a new species. Bostanchi's recently discovered specimen's stomach contained a half-digested bird, indicating to researchers the possibility that the animal used its unique tail to attract prey. Known as a caudal lure, it's an aggressive form of animal mimicry where a tail evolves to look like something else. This is a trick many other creatures use, including a shark, some lizards, and other snake species. In the spider-tailed viper's case, its tail resembles the prey of other animals, primarily birds, who are met with a nasty surprise when they try eating what looks like a spider and are eaten instead. Yikes! These snakes are very rare and hard to spot, but in 2008, scientists went to the Zagros Mountains in Iran to track them down. They observed the snake hiding until something came close, like a lizard. Then it would swoosh its tail along the ground looking exactly like a running spider. Birds are immediately attracted to it. The snake's attack on prey takes less than 1 second. Limited observation has shown that the reptile's tail is uncannily deceiving to its hungry targets. Flying snake. There are 5 flying snake species throughout the jungles of South and Southeast Asia, from Western India to Indonesia. Scientists know relatively little about these creatures and their odd airborne activities, but they've established a few solid facts. For one, flying snakes don't actually fly because they can't gain altitude, but they come pretty close. Researchers once thought of them as parachuters, but further research proved that they qualify more as gliders. Flying snakes dangle from tree branches in the form of a J shape to prepare for takeoff and use their lower body strength to propel themselves into the air. While airborne, they flatten to twice their normal width, enabling their bodies to trap air and sway back and forth to maneuver themselves in their chosen direction. Scientists don't know why or how often flying snakes fly, but they are extremely good at it and are even capable of outgliding their mammalian equivalent, the flying squirrel. One theory for this unconventional method of travel is that it helps snakes avoid predators by moving from one tree to another without descending to the ground. Elephant trunk snake. One of the weirdest looking serpentine species is the elephant trunk snake, which is named after its loose, baggy skin that looks much too big for its body. It's an aquatic species that inhabits warm, fresh, and brackish waters in various Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. This river-dwelling, non-venomous nocturnal ambush predator grows up to almost 8 feet long. Its saggy exterior is covered in tiny, rough scales with sharp triangular ridges that dig into its prey and prevent even the most slippery fish from escaping, including those covered in protective mucus. Elephant trunk snakes are adapted to their aquatic environments in other ways, including their ability to remain underwater for up to 40 minutes at a time, intermittently surfacing for just 15 to 20 seconds each time to resupply their air. This unique species is unfortunately widely hunted for its meat as well as its skin, which is highly valued in the leather industry and as a material for making musical drums. Hundreds of thousands of elephant trunk snakes are killed annually for these reasons, and they are further threatened by habitat loss. Horned viper. The horned viper is a nocturnal ambush predator that dwells in semi-arid environments and stony desert landscapes throughout North Africa and parts of the Middle East, at altitudes of up to 4,900 feet. As its name implies, its head is equipped with two distinct horns, which sit above its eyes. Horned vipers are small, only reaching up to 20 inches long. They are also venomous, but their bites are generally non-fatal to humans. I mean, no promises. The potency and composition of their venom varies depending on the region, but it typically consists of 13 toxins, and the strongest combination is known to cause severe bleeding. To cope with the harsh heat and sunlight of its environment, the horned viper buries itself in the sand, with only its head and eyes poking out from the ground. The sand helps to keep the snake cool and also camouflages it as it lies in wait for prey. Oddly, some specimens have very small horns, or no horns at all, and are therefore easily mistaken as members of other viper species, often making the horned viper difficult to identify. Like many other snakes, the horned viper has not been assessed for placement on the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List. It's currently not considered threatened, although it's exposed to several concerning factors, including overcollection, pollution, invasive species, and habitat destruction. The tentacled snake. The tentacled snake is an aquatic brackish and freshwater species named after the knobby appendages on its face. It's the only snake in the world with this unique feature. This peculiar serpent dwells in murky, shallow waters among lakes, streams, and rice paddies in parts of Southeast Asia, including Cambodia, Vietnam, and Thailand. It uses its tentacles, which are loaded with nerve cells, for detecting prey in the muddy water. The nerve cells are clustered in the centers of the tentacles rather than on their surface, suggesting that instead of assisting with taste or smell, they enable snakes to see in situations where their eyes are essentially useless. Tentacled snakes are clever ambush predators who have adapted to their aquatic environment in impressively unique ways. Their preferred hunting strategy is to herd their victim into an ideal position for capture. They feed almost exclusively on fish, whose first and very effective line of defense is to wrap their body into a C shape and flail frantically to escape a predator. To get around this, tentacled snakes maneuver themselves into a question mark shape and position their bodies in such a way that when a fish assumes its defensive C shape and begins flashing its tail, it propels itself straight into the snake's mouth. The entire ordeal takes just a few milliseconds. Besides fish, tentacled snakes occasionally feast on crabs and frogs, and certain species seem to have specialized venom for their preferred prey. Hairy bush viper. Also called the spiny bush viper and the rough-scaled bush viper, the hairy bush viper is native to tropical regions of Central Africa. This small venomous species is quite obviously named after its distinctive keeled scales, and it spends much of its time in trees. Hairy bush vipers are small and slender compared to their rattlesnake and viper relatives, growing between 23 and 29 inches long. They are covered in bristly green or brownish scales, which are longest at the head and reduce in size along the back. These snakes have potent neurotoxic venom, which is capable of causing swelling and serious hemorrhaging of the internal organs. Their toxicity varies depending on location, weather, altitude, and even the individual snake. Bites can be fatal to humans, especially in cases where first aid is hard to get to, and there is no known antivenom. Luckily, humans rarely encounter hairy bush vipers, who on the other hand are unfortunately largely understudied due to their nocturnal nature and remote habitat. With little to no population data to go on, researchers are unsure whether they are threatened. As of now, there are no conservation concerns revolving around the species. That's good. Worm snake. The worm snake is a tiny pinkish-brownish specimen that resembles what it sounds like. There are two subspecies in North America, the eastern worm snake, which lives in the eastern U.S. south of New England, and the similar western worm snake, which resides west of the Mississippi. Both species are non-venomous and prefer to live underground. Worm snakes dwell primarily in damp, deciduous forests among rotting logs, underneath rocks and leaves, and in loose soil. They are rarely seen because they rarely surface above ground. At first glance, worm snakes look a lot like earthworms, hence their name. They are no more than 13 inches long and range in color from dark brown to a pinkish hue. Ironically, earthworms are the worm snake's primary prey, but they also feed on salamanders, slugs, insect larvae, and snails. Scientists know very little else about this elusive species, which is likely vulnerable to predators like birds, small mammals, other snakes, and large lizards and salamanders. Long-nosed vine snake. This remarkable species is found in Southeast Asia, particularly in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Also known as the Asian green vine snake and the long-nosed whip snake, this slender yellowish tree-dwelling predator grows up to 5 feet long. Pretty big. Unlike most other snake species, the long-nosed vine snake is equipped with excellent binocular vision, which it uses for scoping out potential prey and striking its target with shocking accuracy. It has unique horizontal key-shaped pupils. When threatened, the long-nosed vine snake responds with intimidation by opening its mouth wide and expanding its body, revealing black and white markings that are normally not visible. Additionally, the snake travels quickly through foliage and travels from one branch to another with ease, sometimes getting semi-airborne thanks to its lightweight body. The long-nosed vine snake is mildly venomous. Bites are uncomfortable and painful, but relatively harmless to humans, with symptoms disappearing within a few days. Nevertheless, anyone who experiences the characteristic numbness indicative of a bite is encouraged to seek medical treatment immediately. Tiger keelback. There are a handful of snake species throughout the world that can store toxins acquired from their food supply, and Japan's tiger keelback is one of them. It's equipped with specialized organs on the back of its neck called nuchal glands, where it stockpiles the toxins of the poisonous toads it feasts upon. When threatened, a tiger keelback will arch its neck to make its nuchal glands more prominent. A predator who bites into them will be sprayed with the toxic fluid and can count on experiencing a terrible taste at best, along with more painful side effects. Interestingly, there are tiger keelbacks who live on toad-free islands, and they do not engage in the defensive nuchal gland displays of specimens who eat the toxic toads. But as researchers learned, snakes who are used to a non-toxic diet will quickly change their behavior when they start ingesting the toads. Gordon Burghardt of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville explained, "So far as I know, this is the only example in terrestrial vertebrates where there is some indication that animals act as if they are aware of when they are toxic and when they are not." While researchers are unsure of exactly how tiger keelbacks are seemingly aware of their toxicity, they suspect that the snakes are somehow capable of monitoring the amount of toxins in their nuchal glands. Impressive, huh? Barbados thread snake. At a mere 4 inches long and with the thickness of a spaghetti strand, the Barbados thread snake is the world's smallest snake species. It's so tiny it can comfortably curl up on the top of a U.S. quarter. The snake's miniature size can be attributed to an extreme version of a condition called island dwarfism, which is when a species evolves to have reduced bodily proportions as a result of being genetically isolated to a small environment. Basically, it's pocket-sized. S. Blair Hedges of Temple University first discovered and described the creature and its various size-related challenges in 2008. For one, according to Hedges, the Barbados thread snake has a pretty narrow diet because their mouth can barely open. They just barely open up enough to squeeze in a little microscopic insect, Hedges further explained. The Barbados thread snake's diet consists primarily of ant and termite eggs and larvae. It spends most of its time in the wet soil, which helps keep it hydrated, as this species tends to easily lose moisture. Unlike almost all other snakes, the Barbados thread snake lays just 1 egg per reproductive cycle. To make matters worse, experts believe it may be nearly extinct, as it's only known to breed on a few square kilometers of forest within Barbados, where the original forests have been vastly cleared away. Ancient rainforest. We think of Antarctica as being a frozen wasteland that's covered in thick ice, but it wasn't always that way. It used to be a continent full of lush vegetation, and for the first time, researchers have found direct evidence of this. An international team of scientists took core samples from a region of seabed on the West Antarctic shelf near the Pine Island Glacier, and they found evidence of a 90-million-year-old fossilized forest with the remains of soil, roots, pollen, and spores. This shows that Antarctica once had what they called an exceptionally warm climate at the time when dinosaurs roamed the Earth, and would have looked very similar to how the forests in New Zealand are today. The samples have been so well preserved beneath the ice that they could even make out the cell structures of plant material. Further studies are now planned to see quite how far this forest stretched across the continent, and it's hoped that with a bit of luck, they may soon find evidence of the animals that once lived there too, with the potential that it could be the new frontier for the discovery of dinosaur fossils. giant void. The ice sheets of Antarctica look like they are solid masses of frozen water, but just like ice cubes in your freezer, there are cavities hidden deep within. While scientists have known this for a long time, they were stunned to find an absolutely enormous giant void that was growing by the day beneath the surface. Currently, it has an area that's the equivalent of 2/3 the size of Manhattan. In certain parts, it is up to 1,000 feet deep. It's located underneath the Thwaites Glacier on the western reach of the continent, and its existence is speeding up the rate at which the ice above it is melting. As a result, it is causing it to grow exponentially. It was once filled with 15 billion tons of ice, but the vast majority of it has melted within the past 5 years. It's only thanks to new satellite imaging techniques that its discovery was made possible, and there are serious concerns about how it'll affect the region. If the entire glacier above it was to melt, then it would release enough water to raise global sea levels by 2 feet. That means everywhere, and that's not even counting the other ice that would fall into its place if it were to disappear. Just be careful when you go to buy your beachfront property. Upside-down rivers. The entire world's surface is covered in the scars of erosion, and rivers are responsible for a lot of it. They usually begin as a trickle from somewhere high up and slowly carve their way through the landscape as the water flows down towards the lowest point. In Antarctica, however, there are actually rivers that work in the opposite way. Instead of carving down into the ice, these subglacial water flows actually carve upwards instead. The reason for this is that warm, fresh water is far less dense than the cold, saline water in the ice, so it actually starts to flow upwards into the ice shelves as they float out into the ocean. While this is a perfectly natural process, it's vital to understand it because it has such an impact on the behavior of the ice. It creates weak points through their undersides, which both contribute to the ice melting and increases the chances that the ice will break up in a similar way to if you score a sheet of glass. These bergs then drift further out into the ocean, and the process contributes to the overall breakup of the ice shelf. Huge mountain range. If you think of where the most impressive mountain ranges in the world are, then you'll probably picture the Alps, the Rockies, or the Himalayas. But there's another massive mountain range that we hardly know about because it's covered in a thick layer of ice. This enormous mountain range is about 1 mile below the surface. Known as the Gamburtsev Mountains, the 750-mile-long range was first discovered more than 50 years ago by Russian researchers. The entire region is covered in peaks of up to 8,000 feet tall, deep valleys, and liquid water lakes. It's buried beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet, but it's still not entirely clear how it was formed. It definitely isn't a volcanic region, and the current theory is that the continent of Antarctica may in fact have been formed by the collision of 2 giant land masses. As one of the regions most susceptible to a warming world, the mountain peaks may actually be revealed again within this century. It's therefore important to try and further understand their formation and precisely what lies down there, because it will determine how much the 6 million square miles of ice above the range will affect the rest of the world if it does end up melting. Rare stardust. Everything on Earth can arguably be called stardust because it's within the dying gasps of a star that all elements are made. There are, however, some that are much rarer than the rest, and one of the most interesting to scientists is an isotope called iron-60. It's quite abundant in space because it's emitted during the final stages of a star's life, but it's still very rare to find it on Earth. The first time the radioactive substance was discovered outside a lab was in 1999 at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, where it lay in sediment from around 3 million years ago. This would indicate that a star went supernova that was far away enough from Earth to not destroy it, but close enough to cover it in debris. Now, the same team has found traces of iron-60 in Antarctic snow. They proved that it didn't originate from the nuclear tests that were conducted around the world in the 50s and 60s, which raises the question of where it came from. Could this be evidence of a nearby star that exploded far more recently than any other data has shown? Or is there something unusual about the structure of the Antarctic continent? Only further research will reveal the truth, and it could force us to reevaluate what we think we know about our cosmic neighborhood. Volcanoes. Volcanoes are some of the most powerful geological formations that occur around the world, but because of the way they develop, they tend to be located in specific regions around tectonic plate boundaries. The most volcanically active region on Earth is known as the Ring of Fire in the Pacific, but recent research has revealed another large cluster of volcanoes beneath the Antarctic ice. Located in a region called the West Antarctic Rift System, Radar imagery has found there to be 178 cone-shaped structures hidden beneath the surface, of which 138 have been confirmed to be volcanoes. If more are found, this could become the densest region of volcanoes in the world, but the most important question that needs to be answered is whether any of them are active. An eruption would undoubtedly put extreme strain on the ice sheets above, which are already weakened because of environmental changes. There is a suggestion that the pressure caused by the heavy ice is actually helping to keep the mounds dormant. But if much more of it melts, the region could potentially reawaken, and this could have catastrophic consequences. The deepest land on Earth. Antarctica's surface appears like an almost flat tundra or desert, with occasional mountains that reach up in the distance. Of course, this is just because the surface of the ice is subjected to powerful winds, and the actual ground of the continent that lies beneath is just as varied as everywhere else on Earth. New scanning techniques have allowed researchers to study Antarctica's topography in ways that have never been possible before, and it's revealed some unexpected results. Efforts were focused on a valley region called the Denman Trough, where it was possible to calculate the amount of ice that flowed through each year. And it was found that to accommodate the volume that channels through it, it must plunge at least 11,000 feet below sea level. This would make it by far the lowest known region of exposed land in the world, a record that was previously held by the Dead Sea, which is a paltry 1,419 feet deep in comparison. This, however, is just the beginning of research like this, and it's quite possible they'll find an even deeper canyon somewhere else on the continent. Ancient lake. Despite the freezing temperatures and the blanket covering of ice and snow, it's amazing to think that there are some regions of fresh liquid water in Antarctica, despite them being thousands of feet beneath the icy surface. In 2019, researchers announced the results of a study that took samples from one of these subglacial lakes, and the findings were completely unexpected. They had been looking at Lake Mercer, which is beneath a glacier on the West Antarctic ice sheet. Covering an area of around 54 square miles, the team had to drill 3,500 feet through the ice to reach it, and they were able to retrieve a sample of 15 gallons of water. In it, they found 10,000 bacterial cells per milliliter, which is about 1/100th of what would be expected in the deepest parts of the ocean. But considering this lake hasn't seen sunlight or the outside world in thousands of years, it's pretty amazing. They think that the microbes are living off carbon deposits that were left there when photosynthesizing organisms were present, and there's enough evidence of life down there that it's quite possible more complex organisms, like tardigrades, are being supported in the environment too. Not only does this teach us much more about life on our own planet, but it's also invaluable data to try and understand where else in the universe microorganisms may be present, with focus returning to Mars and some of the moons in the outer reaches of our solar system. Radioactive rocks. Antarctica is the coldest region on Earth, so it may be a surprise to hear that deep beneath the surface there is evidence of something hot and radioactive, but recent research has found this to be the case. Rather than being in the ice itself, these natural formations are beneath the continental ground that the ice sits upon and is similar to deposits that are found elsewhere on Earth. Quite how much there is and its impact on the ice sheet is unknown, but when scientists model the rate of melting, they don't factor these processes into it because they simply don't know that they're there. By researching and understanding these hidden heat sources more, it'll be possible to know how much of the rate that glaciers are melting are a result of climate change and how much is actually due to completely natural causes, and is in effect something that we can't do much about. Mysterious massive object. As one of the most uncharted surface regions of the Earth, countless satellites are continually taking images of the frozen continent, and in 2006, images were beamed back that showed a highly unusual anomaly within the ice of a region called Wilkes Land. Measured as being up to 151 miles across and just over half a mile deep, the Wilkes Land anomaly has been used by some conspiracy theorists as proof of the hollow Earth theory, but its true origin could be even more significant than that. Throughout the Earth's history, there have been at least 5 mass extinction events that have wiped virtually all traces of life from the planet. The most famous one, and the most recent, took place around 66 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous period, and was what killed the dinosaurs, but it was by no means the most destructive. The Wilkes Land anomaly ties up with what you'd expect to see from a gigantic asteroid strike, more than twice the size of the one thought to have been responsible for the Cretaceous event, and its timing lines up with the most destructive extinction that we know of, the Permian-Triassic event that took place 252 million years ago. This could therefore be the origin point of a catastrophe that killed at least 90% of all species, and by a fluke of it happening in Antarctica, it may have been much better preserved than any other. Thanks for watching! Who knew there was so much going on underneath the ice? Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon! Bye!